Good morning and welcome to This Week. White House in crisis.
I knew this was going to be a heavy lift.
Obama's high-stakes Syria gamble failing fast. Can he salvage a win? Can his presidency survive a defeat? What will it mean for America's security and our role in the world? This morning, breaking details about the crisis in Syria from the White House, Congress, and our Powerhouse Roundtable. Plus,
does the State Department know you're speaking out now?
No, they don't know I'm here.
1 year after Benghazi, the first interview with the senior diplomat on the ground. Greg Hicks' dramatic inside story of the attacks. And a congresswoman's miracle baby. How she beat the odds against a fatal disease.
That is her personality. She's such a fighter.
All that right here this Sunday morning.
From ABC News, This Week with George Stephanopoulos starts now.
Hello again. It wasn't even on the agenda 1 month ago, but now the vote to use military force in Syria has become the most critical test of the Obama presidency. The stakes are high. America's security and credibility on the line. So is the balance of power between the president and Congress and the rest of Obama's agenda in his second term. And right now, it's a vote the president would lose. ABC's whip count in the House shows 229 members likely in the no camp. Only 44 are likely to vote yes. And let's start out with more on that from ABC's chief White House correspondent, John Carl. And John, the situation a bit better for the White House and the Senate, but this is an uphill battle for the White House, and they know it.
Oh, George, that's right. Even White House officials acknowledge if the vote were today, the president would lose, but they are promising a massive effort to turn that around. This will be the biggest congressional effort by the White House since the battle over health care in the president's first year as president. And it's going to be a very visible effort. First, you're going to see the president do 6 network television interviews, national interviews, tomorrow. There'll be a big address to the nation on Tuesday. And, George, the most interesting thing here is they've even enlisted former members of the Bush administration to make the case for Republicans, including Bush's former national security advisor, Stephen Hadley, who has been talking directly to Republican members of Congress. But, George, the president himself has also been making a personal effort. They've brought individual members to the White House, even bringing them into the Situation Room to show them classified evidence. But, George, one key thing that is not happening here, the president's grassroots army, Organizing for America, 30 million Twitter followers. They are completely on the sidelines here. They will not be taking part in this effort.
Yeah, not a lot of support for this in the president's base, at least right now. But what if the president can't turn this around? The White House has been dancing all over that question.
George, that is the big question, especially given where the vote count is now. I tried to ask that question directly to the president. He told me point blank he would not give me a direct answer. But what I can say is some of his top advisors have told me that they cannot conceive of him going forward with military strikes if Congress says no. On the other hand, we've had military officials tell us that given where the planning is now, they can't see him pulling the plug on this either.
Okay, John Carl, thanks very much. Let's get right to the president's chief of staff, Denis McDonough. And Dennis, so many questions about the president right here and what he would do if you can't succeed in getting those votes in the next couple of weeks. As John pointed out, the president did not directly answer that question on Friday, but he did say this. He said his call to Congress was not a political ploy or symbolism, and he went on to say this.
I put it before Congress because I could not honestly claim that the threat posed by Assad's use of chemical weapon posed a imminent direct threat to the United States.
With those words, hasn't the president effectively ruled out taking any action if the Congress votes no?
Well, George, I think it's important for us to, before we jump to any conclusions, I obviously really admire John Carl's reporting, but look, I've been talking to dozens of members of Congress over the last week. Not a single one of them so far has rebutted or refused the intelligence, which is to say everybody agrees that on August 21st, Assad used chemical weapons against his own people. So the question for Congress this week is a very simple one. Should there be consequences for his having used gases, chemical weapons to kill more than 1,000 of his own people, including more than 400 children? The answer to that question will be followed closely in Tehran. The answer to that question will be followed closely in Damascus. The answer to that question will be followed very closely by members of Lebanese Hezbollah. So this is a big question and a big week for Congress to address that very fundamental national security issue. Now, as you heard the president say, we didn't go to Congress because we thought this was an empty exercise. We are investing a lot of time and effort in this because we think Congress should be a full partner in our national security matters, and when they are, we're stronger as a country. Now, members of Congress also need to understand that if they want to see Assad held to account for this activity, they should vote yes on the resolution.
I understand that's the arguments you've been making, but as we've seen, members of Congress are not buying in, at least not yet. And some have even raised the specter of impeachment if the president goes forward in the absence of congressional approval. Here's Duncan Hunter, Republican of California. I think he's breaking the law if he strikes without congressional approval. And if he proceeds without Congress providing that authority, it should be considered an impeachable offense. How will the president factor in the prospect of impeachment into his final decision?
What the president is focused on right now, George, is the national security implications of what is undeniably and unrebutted intelligence, which suggests that the Assad regime used chemical weapons against its own people, killing 400 children. So that's what he's focused on right now. We believe that we have the capability in place to do it. Congress should be our full partner in that effort, George. That's exactly what we're focused on. That's the question before Congress this week. My hunch is, you know Washington better than anybody, George. There'll be all sorts of distractions and other things that try to knock us off our game. But that's the question before us and before Congress this week.
So I know you're not going to give me a yes or no answer on what the president would do if they don't vote him up. But what are the consequences? You had hinted at some of them. What are the consequences if the president and Congress cannot go forward after this? How much damage will that do to his presidency? Ross Douthat of the New York Times and many others have said basically this would finish off the president as a credible actor on the world stage. Do you agree?
You know, I really enjoy Ross's reporting and his writing. I think he's a really thoughtful guy. I have to say that right now, politics, all those questions are going to be debated and worked out by others. We're focused on the national security question before us, George, and it's a very fundamental and important question. Will there be consequences? Now, what we're trying to reinforce here and what our allies supported us reinforcing just Friday at the G20 is a prohibition that goes back almost 100 years. A prohibition against the use of chemical weapons. Why does that matter? You know, in World War I, our troops were subjected to chemical weapons attack regularly. Not since World War I have they seen the same kinds of attacks. That's important. That increases our security. That reduces the burden against our men and women who are in the armed forces, who are taking a lot of burdens lately, by the way. So we want to underscore this. We think Congress should join us in doing it.
You're facing a lot of opposition, even from your allies. MoveOn.org, strong support of the president in his first run for the presidency, backed him up on his opposition to the Iraq war. But they have given us this new ad exclusively that they're going to start running in the country tomorrow. Take a look.
We never set out to spend 8 years at war in Iraq or to be mired down for more than a decade of fighting in Afghanistan. So what should America expect if we rush into Syria alone with no real plan for the consequences? We already know it gets worse.
Meanwhile, our next guest, Senator Ted Cruz, Republican of Texas, suggests that American forces who were part of a strike against Syria would be serving as al-Qaeda's air force. You're seeing opposition from both the left and the right. Your response?
I'm outraged for somebody to suggest that our people would be serving as allies to al-Qaeda. One. Two, on this question about what this is and what this isn't. What this is, George, is very clear. Targeted, consequential, limited attack against Assad forces and Assad capabilities so that he is deterred from carrying out these actions again. Here's what it is not. It is not boots on the ground. It is not an extended air campaign. It is not Iraq, Afghanistan, or Libya. This is a very concerted, concentrated, limited effort that we can carry out and that can underscore and secure our interests.
Finally, yes or no question. Will this resolution pass?
This resolution is going to pass after we work this week, George. Members have been in their districts and in their states. We've been talking to many of them, dozens of them. And when they see this intelligence, they don't rebut it. So the bottom line is they have to answer the question, should there be consequences? And the answer to that question will be followed closely in Tehran, in Damascus, and elsewhere.
Denis McDonough, thanks very much.